commandment with promise, that it may be well with thee, and thou livest long on the earth. For a few moments today, I want to talk to you about the principle of honor. The Lord bless you. You may be seated. Before I begin today, let me say what a great honor it is to be here today. And again, I pray something I say will help you to live a more victorious life for God. The church at Ephesus, it was a church that had several problems. Revelation says, thou hast left thy first love. The word left is actually the Greek word for divorce. It's apoluo. They didn't lose love. They divorced themselves from love. They didn't forget how to love. They decided they didn't want to love anymore. Love was too controlling. And God said, if you don't repent and do the first works, I will remove your candlestick. Which, that happened in 460-something AD. An earthquake buried the city of Ephesus, and it was never rebuilt. It ceased to exist. Why was this such an issue? Why did Paul address it? The whole principle of society is based upon a family. Honoring parents is part of that process. And if we don't, then it starts causing chaos within the family. I've had the privilege of traveling to the nation of China several times over the last 10 or 12 years, and been to several different cities and spoke. One of their problems is they have gone from a nation that was very family-oriented to a nation that's chaotic. And the reason it became chaotic is because they had a one-child policy, that a family couldn't have more than one child. There was an exception to that law. If you were married to somebody else, you could have another child. So they didn't quit having more children. They just started having more marriages. And so instead of having one marriage, they wound up with 2 or 3 or 4 different marriages, and their whole structure has collapsed, and it's caused incredible chaos as a result of what's happened there. How did that happen? What caused that? Well, it's the simple principle of honor. That word is used many times in the New Testament. It's used many times in the Old Testament. Jesus used it. Paul uses it. Peter uses it. Peter says, husbands, live with him according to knowledge, giving honor unto the wife as the weaker vessel, being heirs together the grace of life, that your prayers be not hindered. Honoring is more than seeing them or giving them words of affirmation. The Greek word for honor, when Peter uses it in 1 Peter 3, and he says, husbands, live with them according to honor, that word is a noun. When Paul uses it in Ephesians chapter 4, when he says, honor thy father and mother, it's timeo, and it's a verb. It requires action. Peter says there's going to be a lifestyle that people are going to notice it, and Paul says there will be behavior that you have to create to cause it to happen. What does the word honor mean? We've talked about some very sensitive issues here this morning, and reasons that these issues are sensitive is that we have forgotten how to honor. And as a result of not honoring correctly, then it's caused all this junk to start happening. If I understand its principle and I apply it, it's life-changing. If I don't, it's going to affect my life. Paul said, honor thy father and mother, that it may be well with thee and thou livest long on the earth. Well, Paul didn't make up the last part of that. It's Deuteronomy chapter 5, verse 16 says the exact same thing. Honoring, why was that one of the Ten Commandments? Why is it number 5? Honor thy father and mother. By the way, there's no asterisk that says you don't have to do it if they're bad people. There's no asterisk with a footnote that says if you don't like them or they're mean to you or they disrespect you or that you develop issues, you don't have to do it anymore. There are no conditions. It's honor regardless of the condition. Well, the word time is a noun that speaks of how valuable something is. Of great price, of great worth, exceedingly valuable. The word timeo means to discover the value of, to uncover the value, exceedingly valuable, of great price or great worth. Why is value such an issue? Because the value that you place on things defines how you treat them. If you had a diamond the size of an egg, what do you think it'd be worth? There's only 9 of them in the world. If you had a diamond the size of an egg, what would it be worth? Somewhere between $60 and $300 million. There are only 9 in the world. There are 2 in the Smithsonian. The Queen of England owns 2. The Crown Jewels of France has 1. A gentleman in Asia who's a billionaire owns 1, and the Third family have the others. If I had this diamond that was worth $60 to $300 million, and it was mine, and I decided I wanted to give it to you, but I just have one condition. The condition is you got to keep it 5 years. Where do you keep it? What do you do with it? Would you keep it at your home? If you would think of that and think that's okay, then you don't care about nobody but yourself. You're very selfish and self-centered. If you would keep it at your house, you'd put everybody in your neighborhood in danger. You're not going to keep it a secret. Somebody's going to find out. And when somebody finds out, well, all the criminals of our world today, they'll show up at your house. If they're going to ransack Nordstrom for purses and they knew you had an unguarded diamond worth $60 million, those 2 that belong to the Queen of England are buried 3 floors below ground in a vault that will endure an atomic bomb. The walls are so thick that an atomic bomb will do no damage to that vault. There are guards on the 3 levels of landings as you go down into the Tower of London. There are guards at the door. You go through a metal detector. They check you out carefully. You can see them, but they're very heavily guarded. Valuable things require them totally differently than things. You got an old pair of shoes that are wore out? Where do you wear them? Where do you leave them? What do you do in them? Mine are by the back door of my house. Now, they rained on probably 30 times this year because we get rain on a regular basis where I live. about 55 inches a year at least. Why are they by the back door of my house? Because the fence was locked and they were muddy, and I didn't dare walk through the house with all that mud on my feet, so I just pulled them off and left them by the back door. They're worthless. They have no value. You can't abuse anything until you make it worthless. The value that you place on the Bible defines how often you read it and how you apply it to your life and how important it is to you. The value that you place on church defines how often you come to church and what you do when you're here. The value that you place on God defines how you relate to Him and how you connect to Him. The value that you place on friends defines how you treat them. The value you place on your job defines what kind of job you do when you get there. The value that you place on your marriage defines how you treat it. The value that you place on women defines how you respond to them. See, pornography destroys the value of a woman. It makes her totally worthless. It degrades her and makes her the slave of a male. He's the dominant force, and she has to be subjected to him. There's no value there. Pornography makes a relationship only about sex. And relationships are not only about sex. Relationships require connection between two human beings, and developing a relationship that takes a lifetime to develop. It's not simply about a physical act that's over in a few moments' time. From the garden to the cross, men thought women were worthless. The world Jesus showed up in, men saw women as being the problem that caused all the issues of the world. According to Jewish historians and other historians, when Jesus arrived, Jewish men didn't measure their age by how old they were. They measured their age by the number of wives they had. A man wouldn't say, I'm 55 years old. He'd say, I'm 15 wives old. Bragged about the number of times he had been married and divorced. Remember what they asked Jesus in Matthew chapter 19? Can a man put away his wife for every cause? I don't like her. She don't smile. She don't make me happy. He could get rid of her for any reason. And Jesus said, thou's heard of old, in the beginning he made a man and a woman, and for this cause shall a man leave father and mother, cleave to his wife, and the two shall be one flesh. But Moses, because of the hardness of your heart, gave you a bill of divorcement. But it wasn't in the beginning. It wasn't God's plan. God didn't create this or give you permission to do this. That wasn't what God created Adam and Eve for. He created them for marriage. And man destroyed it from the garden to the cross. Women were objects men owned. They could do with them whatever they wanted. They could literally execute them and never be held accountable for it. That's where Jesus shows up. Remember what the scripture said about when he arrived? When did he arrive? In the fullness of, at the right moment, Jesus arrived. Why did he arrive at that moment? Because at that moment, the relationship between a man and woman were so distorted that families were wrecked. Families are divided. There's chaos everywhere. And that's where Jesus showed up. You know, when we read the Bible, we read it through rose-colored glasses. We see the Bible in ways that we never pay attention to the little things. We never see the details. And there's lots of little details in that scripture that we never pay one bit of attention to. What was Jesus' first miracle? Now, where will you find the information about that miracle? Who wrote about it? Where's it found? Well, it's only found in the Gospel of John. It's in the 2nd chapter. Mark doesn't write about it. Matthew doesn't write about it. Mark's the first gospel written. Matthew comes second. And Matthew quotes a lot of what Mark wrote. Luke's gospel comes after 63 or 64 AD, after Paul's execution, and he went back to Ephesus and was at Ephesus and lived there. And in 70 AD, Mary came with John from Jerusalem, and he was able to connect with Mary, the mother of Jesus, and John. And John writes his gospel somewhere around 100 AD. It's the last book written. Now here's this old man at the end of his life. He's got every other book written, all those he has. And he realizes there's information the church don't have. If I don't write it, they won't have a lot of information necessary. If John hadn't taken the time to write his gospel, we could not explain the new birth. We wouldn't have the Nicodemus story. We wouldn't understand being born of water and spirit. And here's this old man at the end of his life realizing there's a lot of very important information that needs to take place. And so he starts writing and filling in details. The last, from chapter 12 or chapter 13 to the end, covers only about a week's period of time. So the majority of it is the last days of his life in Jerusalem. But he starts in chapter 2, very first verse, says Jesus was invited to a wedding in Cana of Galilee. Now, why is that significant? Because it's his first miracle. We don't even think about it. The others didn't see it important. Why wouldn't you record the first thing Jesus did? But they didn't. John writes, he took 12 men to a wedding. Why did he take 12 men to a wedding? Well, you got to understand who he actually is. Who is he? Who is Jesus? He's the Son of God. He's the second Adam. First Adam got it all messed up. First Adam didn't do his job. He didn't keep the garden clean, and he didn't protect it. So the second Adam comes, and the first thing he does is drag 12 men to a wedding to show them how wives are supposed to be treated. Now, when you read it, you can often read it and think Jesus was very disrespectful to his mother. But Jesus was not disrespectful to his mother. And if you read it and you read it carefully, you will see it. Now, in our language, we miss a lot. You go to the original text and you read it from the Greek language, then you actually see how this story unfolds. And Mary comes to Jesus. Now, it appears to me that Jesus set this up. He took extra people they didn't know was coming so that they had run out of wine. It says he brought his disciples. Now, I'm only saying 12. That word could literally mean 50 or 100 or 200. He brought a group with him. Let's just use it, okay? He brings a group of men with him to this wedding that they weren't expecting, and they ran out of wine. Now, should that be a problem? Well, it wouldn't appear to us that it would be, but to them, it was a major problem. If you invited somebody to your home and you didn't give them enough food and drink to get home, and they suffered some kind of problem on the way home as a result of you not giving them supplies to be executed. It's a stoning offense. They'd took the dad outside of the city and stoned him to death because he invited people to his home and didn't give them resources to get back home. The bride would have become the laughing joke of the town. Everybody'd make fun of her and laugh at her because her dad didn't think enough of her to provide everything necessary for a wedding to take place. Now, Mary is in charge of this wedding, and there's a lot of writers from the first century that wrote material that's not considered to be ordained, so it didn't wind up in the Bible, but those things still exist, and there are copies that people have of some of those letters. And some of that information that's in the first century, before 100 AD, some of that information indicates that the wedding Jesus is at is actually John's. So Jesus goes to John's wedding. And how's John connected to Jesus? Well, his mother and Mary are sisters. And Mary is in charge of this wedding. And she comes to Jesus and says, we're out of wine. And Jesus, what's his response? Well, it's in our King James, it says, well, what has that got to do with me? But that's not what he said. He used a phrase that can be interpreted two ways. It can be interpreted in a negative way or a positive way. And it can be interpreted in a negative way if the word you use to introduce it is negative. If the word you use to introduce it is a kind word or a positive word, then you have to interpret it a different way. And he speaks to his mother. What's he call her? Mother? What do you call her? Woman. Now, to us, that would appear to be a word of disrespect. But the word he used in the Greek language is the highest term of endearment that you could give a female. The word we have in our language that'd be closest to it would be queen. He honored her as the greatest woman living of that day. And when you use that kind of term, then you have to translate it, I'll take care of this. I can handle this. What does she say? Whatever he says to the servant, whatever he says do it. So Jesus says, get all the water pots. They were somewhere around 4.5 feet tall. They'd hold 20 to 30 gallons apiece. They were at the front of the house to provide waters for people coming or going. And Jesus says, fill them to the brim. Top. Fill them till the water runs over. Why? So nobody could say something got added on the way. They're totally full. And once they're totally full, he says, okay, take a little of it to the master. And when he took it to the master of the ceremony, he says, where's this been? You're supposed to do this at the front, and you save the worst to last. Well, you saved the best to last. What happened here? See, wine in Jesus' day, if it was fermented, never had more than 0.5% alcohol in it. Wine today has 21 proof. It's 21% alcohol. It's 42 proof. It's 21% alcohol. You drink one glass of wine a day and you're legally intoxicated. Wine of Jesus' day was used to purify water. They'd mix 1 part wine with 40 parts water, and it'd kill all the amoebas and protozoas, and they could drink the water without getting some kind of dysentery. He created enough wine. He creates somewhere around 180 gallons of wine. He creates enough wine that when they get through, there'll be enough left over to sell, and that couple live on for a year without anybody working. So Jesus didn't just make sure they had enough for the wedding. He gave them enough so that they could share it with other people or sell it and not have to work. What a wedding present. A year's wages without having to work. What was his last thing he did on the cross? John records that too, because the others don't record it. What's the last thing he did? He says to that disciple, and John didn't even put his name there, he called him that disciple, "Behold thy mother." That wasn't his mother, that's his aunt. "Behold thy mother." And he took her into his home from that day forward, and he took care of her. That was John. So the first thing he did was to make sure a bride is not shamed, embarrassed, or humiliated. The last thing he did on the cross was make sure she was taken care of and that her life was not a wreck after his death. Now tell me this is not important. See, gentlemen, our world has taken the value of a woman and made it worthless today. Now, part of that has become a product of their own behavior. So women don't have a problem with what they see. Women could care less what you look like. They're not impressed with your looks. Women respond to touch and romance. Men only respond to what they're looking at. There's never been a car wreck produced by a woman driving down the street, seeing a man in the front yard in a bathing suit. There have been billions of car wrecks produced by men driving down the street. Men are visual. They're not. The world knows that. If they want to sell a man a socket or a ratchet or some channel lock, they're going to stick a woman in a bathing suit with them in her hand, and that he's going to buy it because he thinks he gets her with the rich. Walk into a convenience store and see them advertise their alcohol. Who's advertising it? Some old dude that looked like you drug him off the street? Some alcoholic or some drunk? What do they use to get men to show up and consume? It's going to be a woman with half her clothes off. So your world knows that. And the world has started doing the same thing in our day that was happening in Jesus' day when he showed up. And as a result of our world, we're seeing people not having value. So you can't abuse anything till you make it worthless. You'll never hurt anybody. You'll never injure anybody until you make them worthless. If you make them worthless, you can leave them out in the ring. You don't care what happens to them. You don't care how they're affected. It doesn't matter to you what takes place in their life because they're throwaways. If they become valuable to you, then you start seeing it differently. See, do you starting to research 95% of females involved in the adult industry were victims of sexual abuse as children. 95%. We don't ask those kind of questions. We don't even talk about that kind of information. And when they're asked, their reasoning is because I can control a man and he can't do nothing about it. So it's become a form of revenge to degrade men, to make them worthless, to show the world that you can put a hook in their nose, you can drag them anywhere, you can make them do anything you want them to do. You can manipulate their lives. And see, if males don't learn how to value things and treat it with dignity and respect, then females won't return it. If we don't become what God created us to be, then we can't expect the world to be any different. Why is pornography an issue? Because it's called an affair of the mind. It happens in your brain. But it at some point will go from being a fantasy of your brain. See, the lies about pornography is they depict sex lasting for hours. And that she will fulfill all of his fantasies and desires. And the fact is, she don't even have a clue what his fantasies are or his desires are. It's all a lie. There's no facts, there's no truth. The sex act lasts less than 13 minutes. God didn't create it to be this hours and hours and hours. But that's what our world's trying to make it appear. That it's a total lie. There's not 1 ounce of truth in any of it. We've been afraid to address the facts, so we've ignored them. And you know that because of pornography today, there's more Viagra prescribed to 18 to 25-year-olds than 65-plus-year-olds. Why? Because the more you view pornography, the less your body is able to respond to what you actually see in person. So when these kids are getting married today, they can't even have a marriage without some kind of medical help or intervention so that their bodies can actually even respond. And by the way, let me just give you a little insight into something that happens here. For you to get a reaction to a male or female, and for your body to respond physically, it requires blood. Do you think your body just generates instantly more blood to give you that erection? Does that happen? Where does it come from? Your body drains the blood from the frontal lobe for that to take place. And the instant you get physically aroused, your brain has no conscience. and you're nothing more than an animal. And if the woman you're involved with doesn't have a conscience, you will do horrible things. We've got to understand the importance of value. And it starts simply first by here. If this place is not valuable to you, nothing else is going to be valuable to you. If he's not valuable to you, nobody else is going to be valuable to you. And if you don't get this right, then you'll never get this right. So it first starts at the house of God by understanding how valuable his word is to my life and applying it and choosing to live by its principles and understanding that it was written for a purpose, and that purpose is to give me the best life I could possibly have. It doesn't harm my life. It doesn't destroy my life. It just gives me the ability to have the best life without wrecking anybody else's life in the process. I don't even go in Christian bookstores anymore. The titles of books just make me want to throw up. I get disgusted reading what Christians are making excuses for in people's behavior. And one of these books that gets circulated all the time, the number one complaints I have from males on a regular basis is, she's not meeting my needs. Because that question or statement got heard so many times, somebody thought they ought to write about it. It's a problem. So now we got this book out here that's called His Needs, Her Needs. Would you look at the person in front of you? Is there a zipper on the back of their body? Can somebody unzip them and they crawl out and you crawl in? There's not a person in the world can meet your needs. Grow up and act like an adult and meet your own needs. Only children run around screaming that their needs are not being met. Put your big boy clothes on. You're the only one here capable of meeting your needs, not somebody else. That's just dumb fantasy that the world started with, and now we've sucked it in the church, and we start thinking this is important and is okay as well. If you go look at the 7 churches of Revelations, and you look at them carefully, and you look at everything, you want to know what God likes and he don't like? Read Revelation. It'll tell you instantly what God likes and don't like. When you read what God didn't like, every one of those things God said, I got a problem with, were characteristics of the city that those churches were living in. The church had been in its world long enough, it started acting like and looking like the world they were part of. Your biggest problem you have today is looking like, thinking like, and acting like the world that's around you. Because the world that's around you, it's selfish, it's self-centered, it doesn't care about nobody but themselves, and as a result of that, we start thinking it's okay to have the same characteristics, and they applaud your anger. They applaud your selfishness. They applaud your self-centeredness. All of that's destructive to every relationship you could try to build. It's destructive to friendship. You know what's sad is you can't even be honest about it. You say that you have it controlled and you're dealing with it. And you also say you can't help yourself, that you're just a type A personality, and so you lose your temper because that's who you are. Well, you don't do that at work, they'd fire your hide. And you sure don't look at pornography at work. They'd fire your hide faster than your anger. So if you can control it at work, why can't you control it at home? See, we can, if we want to. We just have to choose to do it. And we've got to get honest about, okay, how do I see her? Is she valuable to me? See, if your wife If diamond worth $60 million, you'll do everything in your power to protect her. If she's an old pair of shoes you want to put on ever so often and wear, you'll do that too. You don't care what you walk in. You don't care how you hurt her. You don't care what happens. It starts with mom and dad. Honor thy father and mother. Find out how valuable they are. They weren't good people. That don't matter if they weren't good people. I can still value them, whether they're good or bad. That's my choice. That's your choice. I choose to become whatever I want to be. The fact is today, you're as spiritual as you want to be. There's nothing stopping you from being more spiritual. There's no devil. There's no obstacles. The only reason we're not more spiritual, we just don't want to be. It takes too much effort. So we get to our safety zone where we feel comfortable here, and so we're just satisfied to live here. So you choose the kind of chaos you want to live in. Now, I live in Houston. We got 6.5 million, 7 million people there, and there's a lot of vehicles. But our traffic's nothing like yours. So you chose to live in chaos. I spent 1 year, 20, 30 something, speaking places in California. And every place I'd go, they could tell by my accent I'm not from California. So they want to know, where are you from? Well, I live in Houston. And the next response out of everybody that asked me that question, and that's not a lie, the next response is, aren't you terrified of a hurricane? No. Why? Well, I know when it's coming, I can leave. Are you terrified of an earthquake? I know when mine's coming, you don't even have a clue. See, we live in as much chaos as we want to live in, and we're comfortable with our chaos, and it takes understanding how much chaos we've allowed in for us to start changing. There's nothing hindering anybody from becoming whatever they want to be, other than don't want to do it. I can be as spiritual as I want to be. I can be as friendly. I can be as loving. I can be as kind. I can do any of these things I want to do if I want to do them. But I just simply have to choose to do it. It's not a devil causing me not to. I need to learn how to value what's valuable. Things that don't cost you anything, you'll throw away. Most Christmas presents get sold in garage sales. What you wanted. What's the biggest shopping day of the year? Christmas. That's when everybody takes back what they didn't want. It didn't cost you nothing. So there's no value to it. But if you have to go out and work for it and spend your energy to do it and then you start seeing it differently. Because, why? It's now valuable to you. You hear politicians say we're a nation of the rule of law, which is a lie. If you'll ask any college professor that teaches law, if we're a nation of the rule of law, they'll tell you no. We're a nation of the rule of value, not the rule of law. Our laws are protect what's valuable to us. And if all you look at is what the law is instead of its purpose, then yeah, you'll see it as a rule of law, when the fact is it's about how valuable things are. If you don't start seeing the ladies as valuable. You'll never change any kind of addictions. You'll never get past the problems. They'll always be there. But if you make them valuable, and it's real easy. You know how you do that? Imagine they're Jesus. Because Jesus said, what you did to them, you did to me. Matthew 18, whatever you do to them, you're doing to me. He also said, don't you know their angels are all, he said plural, not one guardian, angels, it's plural. There's at least two. Their angels are always in the presence of my Father. Whatever you do to them, you've done to me. So you want to scream at one of them? Then just imagine you're screaming at Jesus. You want to slap one of them? Imagine that's Jesus you're slapping. Put some value to what. It changes everything about your life when you put it in the right kind of perspective. But if you let your world affect how you're doing it, it's okay because your world won't have a problem with none of this. Honor thy father and mother, that it may be well with thee, and thou livest long on the earth. Value is the key to your life. It has to become more than a thing. It has action where you start living it by your lifestyle, not simply by your words. I remember as a kid hearing people say, don't do as I do, do as I say. If you can't live the life, keep your mouth shut. Don't expect people to do what you don't do yourself. You start modeling the behavior, you'll see changes. We have that power today. It's our choice. It is a choice. The Lord bless you.
Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord. I don't want to miss this moment of revelation and perspective change. If I could have the men just come real quick. Let's end this in prayer. Prayer for one another, because I want this just to sink in and ask God to just burn it in our brain. This is a perspective, life-changing, what you just heard. If you will apply it, if you will put the value into it. Come on up front. Men, come on, let's hurry up. I don't want to rush you. I'm not trying to say hurry up.